everyone. I'm Linda Nickell, and welcome to the Happiness Hour. My goal here is to help us all connect, inspire, and create. Every week, a new speaker joins us to share a bit of inspiration, creativity, and their art through photography. Upcoming presentations can be found on my website at lindanickell.com. Under Happiness Hour, you'll find the links to my YouTube channel and our community blog. Erin Randall is a coach here in Austin, Texas, and you can find her at admilyoracoaching.com. Say hello, Erin.
Hello, Erin.
Am I getting any better at the pronunciation?
It was spot on perfect tonight. And I'm also really happy that you stopped introducing me as a motivational speaker, because I don't know exactly anyone that I've ever motivated. I mean, I'm good at motivating my dogs to get out of the house to go for a hike. That's it.
She's being a little modest, because I can look in the room here and I know that she's bitten a few of your tails. So she's been a little modest right there. My guest tonight is Michael Rung. Michael is a nature and landscape photographer based in North Texas. If you already follow his work, you know that he spends a lot of time and energy into creating images that are rich in content, and he instills a fresh perspective with each photograph he produces. On his website, michaelrungphotography.com, you will find links to his blog, his YouTube channel, and his portfolio. This is Michael's third presentation for the Happiness Hour, and you can find his previous sessions, tips and tricks using Lightroom, and anatomy of an image from visualization to realization on the Happiness Hour YouTube channel. In tonight's presentation, setting goals to make good pictures, Michael is going to share how he's used yearly challenges and goals to overcome stagnation and to strive for continual improvement of his landscape and nature photography. So welcome back to the Happiness Hour, Michael.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have a request. So the next time that we get you here, I need a shorter title for your classes. They are the longest. And they don't fit on the thumbnail. And you like to use these big words like visualization and realization. It's like, I'm getting all tongue twisted. So stop that. So how are you doing?
Well, you're on to me now. That's really my motivation, is to try to trip you up when you're introducing me, but I'm trying. I hear it from Heather too. So, and I did give you the, using goals to make photos good, but that might be a little dumbed down more than what I intended.
So Michael and I have known each other for a couple of years now. Can I safely say that? And I still haven't gotten his sense of humor, because maybe there isn't any, but well, late at night, I'm like, Michael, I need a title. And he threw it out there and I'm going, that's a really weird title, but let me sleep on it. And then I'll come back and we'll figure something out. And I kind of just didn't. I kind of took you at your word. I threw it out there and you're like, oh my God, she really left it. So we might change this when it gets to the YouTube channel, so it doesn't sound a little bit more sophisticated. So with that, Michael, I know that I glossed over a lot of the stuff that you're doing, and like your YouTube channel is pretty cool. I love your Lightroom and Snap. They've been helpful to me, and I see people commenting on your page here and there. So I know other people are appreciating them. So tell us what else you've been doing, and anything that I glossed over, feel free to take this moment to kind of tell us what you're up to.
Yeah. I mean, I think like most of us, I haven't been doing a whole lot going out and shooting locally, but I decided with the pandemic and staying at home in 2020 that starting up my YouTube channel that I've been thinking about doing for a year, 18 months at the time. What better time than when I didn't have a commute and had some more time in my back pocket. It's a lot of work. It's been a lot of learning experience, but I've really enjoyed it. The feedback has been great. So thank you for that. Otherwise, really, it's just what we're going to be talking about here is, trying to continue to strive and move forward in my photography, and never settle for good enough, and just keep trying to drive forward. So I keep looking at myself on my monitor and my cameras here. So
Well, I was wondering, what is he doing over there? But
Yeah,
okay.
it's confusing the way I've got it set up.
It's because you're a computer geek and you have,
Yeah.
like John Fisher, a whole desk full of monitors, and you want to see yourself in all of them. I get that.
I don't know where to look. No, I actually got started probably like many people, just shooting with my phone, and I'd been kind of playing around with it for a few years. And then in 2015, I had a project at work that spun up that required some international travel, which, just really was a bummer. That's sarcasm, Linda, since you don't know my sense of humor. But anyways, I had a trip to Ireland, and I was over there for 2 weeks. So I had a weekend to myself, and I didn't have a camera or anything with me, just my phone. And I ended up doing a day trip up to Northern Ireland. It was just a bus tour thing along the Northern Ireland coast, and Belfast and Giant's Causeway and that. And I'd taken a lot of photos back by my hotel near Dublin and that, and got back from that and was looking at them. I was like, these are actually pretty good, and sharing them on social media, because why else do we take photos these days? And everybody kind of oohing and awing over them, and it just kind of planted that seed in my mind that maybe I've got an eye for composition. So the few weeks after I got back from that trip, I went out and bought my first camera, and the rest actually is a lot of what I'm going to be covering here. So I'm going to just stop there so I don't ruin my own presentation. But it was just kind of dumb luck that I stumbled into it. I'd always kind of enjoyed it, but never really had a passion for it. And it was that trip that really just sparked the whole thing for me.
I know a little bit about your story because I kind of got stuck in a car with you for a few hours. So
I forgot about that.
You guys, I met Michael a couple of years ago. We were invited to a mutual friend's birthday trip, and Michael showed up, and I was like, "Who's that guy?" And I spent, I don't know, 3 or 4 days with you guys, and it was fantastic. And watching Michael work, he's very serious about his photography, and when you look at his images and you read those backstories, it's more than just a pretty picture. There's some depth, and there's creativeness and art behind what he's doing. So I hope that you enjoy his presentation. So let's get started, Michael.
All right. Can I share my screen now?
Please.
Do I have permission?
Please. Yes, of course.
All right. So thank you all for joining me. All right. So if you've sat through one of my sessions before, you've now seen this slide for the third time, but it is very important to me to share kind of my approach from a nature photography standpoint. Obviously, I love the natural areas I go out and shoot in, and a big part of that is helping preserve them as well. And especially, I think I mentioned this in my last session, but for whatever reason with the pandemic and some of these natural areas really being, in some cases, overrun and mistreated, taking every opportunity I can to encourage everybody to really approach things, kind of leave no trace principle is part of this nature first photography principle as well, but try to leave it better, take care of it yourself. Don't leave anything, but what is it? Don't take photos and just leave footsteps. So just something I wanted to vouch for personally at the start of each of these, to encourage everybody to get more involved. And even if it's little things, I take just a grocery shopping bag with me when I'm at my local park and out shooting, and try to pick up things that I find laying around to within reason. Some things I ain't going to touch. But anyway, it's just something I want to share out there. You can find more information online about Nature First Photography. It's free to join, and it's a really good cause to be a part of as we all enjoy this wonderful world we live in. So in today's session, some things we're going to cover, just kind of starting off with the stages of photographers. Basically, we all kind of go through a similar journey or similar progression when we're first starting out. And then I want to walk through my own journey so far. And I just shared part of it in terms of kind of what drew me into photography and how I got started. My hope as I go through that story and how I've challenged myself with goals and challenges and things like that, is that it sparks in your mind either things that you've done maybe without even really realizing it that have helped you get out of a rut or get over a roadblock you've encountered in your own journey, or make you think of things that you can do. Maybe today you're feeling kind of stagnant and maybe even bored with it a little bit because we have been home so much, and maybe you're not going on the big trips that you've done in the past or you'd like to do. So I'm hoping all of this really spurs some questions for yourself to ask to help you progress in your own journey as well. And then I'll walk through some examples of things that you can ask yourself at the end here as well, in case you're struggling with that. So jumping right on here, the stages of photography. And I need to minimize myself up here because it's blocking my notes. So, obviously right now we're all at different places. We've all been shooting for a different amount of time. We've all invested a different amount of time in learning and practicing and all of that. But as I just said a moment ago, we all kind of go through the same progression, even if we have different goals. We're doing it just for personal enjoyment. We're doing it just to share our experiences with friends and family, or for our own memories, or maybe you want to try to turn it into a side income or a career or whatever. We all may be on different journeys, but kind of those first stepping stones are very similar for most photographers. And it's where we get into one of my favorite photography slides I've come across, is the stages of a photographer. A little bit of an eye chart, but the orange line is your knowledge line. So of course you start off with very minimal or no knowledge, and you're just shooting on auto. And then suddenly you understand how exposure works, and things kind of taper off from there. But also my favorite on here is probably the blue line of how good you think you are versus the green line of the actual quality of your photos. And starting out, you think everything's amazing and everybody's giving you good feedback and you think you're great. And then for me, I bought my first DSLR, and suddenly I had no clue what I was doing. I could take a decent photo with my phone, but suddenly using this camera with these different settings and lenses I could change out, I had totally fallen off a cliff, so to speak. So that blue line is very relevant in terms of how good I felt I was, and as well as the actual quality of my shots. So just a little humorous thing to interject here, but it is, I think we've all experienced it, talking to John, we're good friends, and even Linda, you kind of go through those cycles where you sit down and look at your work for whatever reason, and you just start feeling like, oh my gosh, everything I take is junk, and why do I even bother? And then you step away for a day or two and come back and everything's all wonderful again. But also, again, I kind of want to talk through how I've overcome some of these mental hurdles as well, in terms of hitting those points where you're frustrated or bored or overwhelmed, what have you. So, one of the biggest things to take away from this slide, besides, I find it humorous and, worth a chuckle, is it is very important, if you're wanting to grow your photographic skills, your photography skills and knowledge and the quality of your images, you really got to start with knowing where you at currently on your own journey. Are you just starting out? Have you been doing it for 6 months, a year, 5 years? And then taking that step back and evaluating it from kind of that higher level to determine where you want to go and how far along you are on the path to that. So why set goals and challenges? Again, it doesn't matter if you just bought your first camera, if you've been shooting for a while, we all hit those same stumbling blocks from time to time. And even if you challenge yourself with a goal, or I'm going to do X for the next 60 days. Maybe it's not something you're going to use every day in and day out, but hopefully you'll see as I go through my own journey story here that those experiences allow you to build a deeper set of knowledge and skills, technical awareness, whatever, so that maybe you have a unique opportunity come your way that it's not your normal day-to-day quote unquote shooting experience, but when the opportunity arises, or you get stuck in a rut, you can maybe pull into that deeper pocket of knowledge and skills and help lift yourself out of that, or be prepared for the experience that you've just had come up unexpectedly. A great example of that is, and again, I'll get to this as I go through, but last year with the pandemic, I had a couple periods where I went 3-4 months without really even picking up the camera, other than maybe, taking photos of the dogs in the yard or something. And when I finally had an opportunity to go on a camping trip in Colorado, I really struggled. And my past experiences kind of gave me that foundational knowledge and, again, just experience of, okay, well, I've felt like this before. What did I do back then to kind of get myself past this and find inspiration again and feel creative again? And then just talking through kind of how I try to approach this. And I come from a background in my corporate job where I've done certified training and coaching and development of people and teams. So this is probably a little bit, corporate-y, for lack of a better way to put it. But as I said, you really need to start with evaluating not only what journey are you on, but where are you on that journey currently? So again, taking that further step back, not just looking at your most recent images, or you just got back and downloading those and going through them, but just looking at everything collectively and asking yourself those questions to help you determine, what are you happy with, where do you see opportunity, where do you feel stuck, so on and so forth. And then seeking those opportunities to learn. There's a ton of resources out there, and if anything, this is probably not the best thing to say as I try to build a YouTube audience and everything, but there's probably too much noise out there, and it can be hard to find the signal versus the noise. I'd like to think what I'm doing with my YouTube channel, for instance, is providing a little bit of signal that I haven't seen before in terms of my Lightroom tutorials and things like that. But going out there and searching or asking others that you know in the photography space, what resources have they used? Ask questions of your peers, maybe find a mentor, things of that nature to help you learn and address those areas when you were in the evaluation stage that you identified were those opportunities. And then the biggest thing, obviously, is you've done the evaluation. You've hopefully learned at least some basics that you can take out when you go shooting. You just got to get out there and practice. Set some timelines around, challenging yourself. I'm going to do this particular thing, or I'm going to shoot this particular style or genre for the next 30 days, 60 days, whatever, and just go out there and practice. And then it all starts over again. Evaluate, okay, I've been doing that for 60 days. How have I progressed? What have I learned? Where do I go from here? So going into my journey, and again, as I talk through this, I'm hoping it doesn't turn into like, oh, here's my slideshow of my vacations that you all get to sit through. What I'm trying to do here again is spur those questions that you can ask yourself to help you identify and evaluate your own, again, journey and where you're at and what you can do to overcome those. I'm going to grab a quick drink here. I do apologize. My allergies have been awful today.
No problem. I can kind of relate to you with
yeah, so bear with me. It's the first day of the year they've really been bothering me, of course. So anyways, ask yourself, maybe this sparks some questions of your own as I'm talking through it. And again, we'll talk, or I'll go through at the end some questions that I've used and some things I kind of thought through to help you think through it on your own as well. And I'm looking at my wrong screen again. So 2015, 2016, I already talked about this. This picture is about as appropriate as it gets in terms of me starting out with my first real camera. Shooting with the phone was so easy, and you don't have to worry about it, right? You can just worry about, okay, rule of thirds, click, and you're done. And then suddenly I've got this thing with knobs and dials and different lenses, and didn't know what aperture priority mode was, didn't really even know what aperture was. Didn't understand the different autofocus modes, didn't know about RAW versus JPEG. I was in Lightroom editing JPEGs for like the first 6 months, totally clueless that there even was anything called RAW. So, I bought this new camera, and it was sparked by that trip to Northern Ireland, or Ireland in general. And I had some other international trips coming up. So I was excited about having this camera that would get better pictures, but I didn't do what I needed to do to actually be able to take the better pictures. I didn't take the time to learn how to use the camera first. So, it's going to sound humble bragging, everybody. I'm in Italy for work. I'm in Germany for work with this big camera, and I have no clue what I'm doing. I'm not happy with the images I'm getting. And it got to a point where I ended up just leaving it in the room and switching back to my phone, or I was carrying a point and shoot as well and using that. So, the learning piece of it is certainly key for anything that you're trying to undertake in life, and in photography especially, because when you're first starting out, it can be very, very overwhelming. So I call this my what the hell am I doing stage. There was a lot of frustration in it. I was learning, but very slowly. And really, there were two things that I identified as I went through the year that were really kind of holding me back here. Was I wasn't shooting nearly enough. For 2015, 2016, I think I only took like 400 shots that weren't like family or pet snapshots, which sounds like a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, as we all know, it's pretty easy to take a good number of shots. So 400 shots in the first year and a half was just not enough for me to practice and learn and understand everything. And again, I didn't take that time to learn ahead of time so that I could go out and practice effectively. The other trap that I noticed I was falling into was, it's very easy on social media to look at, the most popular images on Instagram or Facebook, or whatever. And, there are these epic skies and sunsets and things like that. And that is the trap I fell into, is I wasn't focusing so much on how I was composing strong images. I was focused on, I got to have an incredible sky. And what it was doing was, from an overview standpoint, looking back on it now, I'd say I've got about 75 images from that first 18 months or so that I would say were potential candidates to maybe I could do something with them. And at least half of those images really relied heavily, and you can kind of see from the small thumbnails here, the zoomed out view, there's a lot of pinks and purples and bold yellows and things like that in there. So I fell into this trap of, I basically, to have a good photo, I needed a good sky. If I didn't have a good sky, either wasn't going out and shooting, or I was coming away with a very just kind of bland and boring photo. And I was also finding that I'd be sitting in the car on my commute home from work, and maybe the sky was incredible, and I'd just be getting mad because I couldn't, I didn't have the opportunity to get anywhere in time to shoot it. So going into 2017, I started recognizing that that was a big opportunity to break away from, is I can't just rely on the same, the same trick over and over again to really grow as a photographer and generate the kind of work that I wanted to make. So in terms of the outcomes, these would be the 10 images from 2016 that I would say were my keepers. And again, you look at them, I think still that there's some beautiful sunsets, certainly, but all of them are basically keyed on that, except for those last two images. And I only came away from that first year and a half of shooting with work that I would say was really what I would call good, even by today's standard. But I did see some glimpses of, some what I thought were good composition skills. And, I'm actually kind of surprised looking back on this stuff, but fairly well controlled editing. I wasn't going too crazy. By this point, I had learned that cranking clarity all the way to 100 and dehaze to 100 weren't actually good things. So I felt like I had a good foundation. I just needed to get over it and take that next step. And again, I was learning very slowly. I wasn't using the big camera as much as I should have been, and I wasn't taking the time to really learn how to use it so that I felt more comfortable with it. So going into 2017, suddenly, I'm getting good feedback on the photos I'm sharing on social media. Friends and family are, this is amazing, it's wonderful and everything. So you kind of fall into that echo chamber. Suddenly, I've got this camera, I'm starting to learn the ropes of it. So now I'm a photographer, and I'm gonna time to go out and start selling prints to people and everything, because I'm so good and everybody tells me I'm so good. Of course, now looking back on that today, I cringe, because it was maybe okay work, but certainly not where I thought I was at that time. And then again, you think about that blue line on the chart. This was probably one of my peaks on the blue line, when reality, my quality of work was much, much lower. But I did start to have that perspective at the end of 2016 and into the first part of 2017 to take that step back and look at my work collectively and evaluate it, so that I could start setting some more specific goals. And that's really probably my biggest mistake in 2015, 2016, is I just said, well, I want to improve, but that's way too broad of a goal to set. You need to be able to break it down into smaller bite-sized chunks, so you've got specific things to focus on. You just say, well, I want to learn how to use my camera, or I want to learn how to take good photos. That's great, but find ways to break it down into smaller pieces, and you can focus on those individual pieces instead of this really generic, broad statement. So in 2017, I recognized that I had the crutch of, I must shoot amazing sunsets. I knew by this point that I really enjoyed photography, but I did feel like, especially by the summer, I was getting into this just period of stagnation. I was just shooting the same thing over and over. But I had the encouragement from my partner and my friends and my family and that to keep at it. And I knew that if I wanted to progress, I had to get away from basically what I had developed was this requirement that I have that amazing sky. So in 2015, 2016, like I said, about half my images, I really relied on that great sky. So I wanted to cut that out. I wanted to become more curious in general. I wanted to explore shooting at longer focal lengths. If you think back to that kind of zoomed out view of my images, maybe you noticed that almost everything was very, very wide angle, just about as wide as I could go. But I had seen a friend of a friend had been sharing some work that I was just absolutely loving, and talking to him about it. It was all taken at with 70 to 200, so much longer focal length than anything I've been shooting at. So I had that curiosity. The Dallas photography group that I joined on Facebook threw out an invitation to come shoot astrophotography. Had the curiosity around that, so I had that experience that I wanted to embrace and learn from. And then I committed that I just needed to practice more and shoot more. So in 2017, I went from shooting about 400 shots in the prior year and a half, to almost 6,000 shots, and trying those new things, longer focal lengths, astrophotography. And through those, it also gives me my first, whoa, I just got a lot of feedback. Are you hearing that, Linda?
Yes. No, I'm not hearing any feedback now.
Okay. Through the act of learning those new skills and techniques myself, it gave me my first opportunity to teach. I was on a trip with my sister and her family, and I had the opportunity to turn around and teach them how to shoot Milky Way and star trails and things like that, which planted that seed of, I kind of like that aspect of things as well. So looking at 2017, I came out of that image with really about 90 images that I would say were pretty good quality that I would work on and edit. And looking at these today, like there's not too many in here that I'm like blown away by. None of these are in my portfolio today, but you can start to see that shift from exclusively wide angle views to the telephoto views. Obviously there's some astrophotography in here. And probably the biggest thing coming into this is from May through December, I shot where I had been shooting, like half my images relied on that bold, brilliant sky. Less than 10% of my shots included the sky at all. From October through the end of the year, I didn't shoot a single scene that was really involving the sky at all. So it drove me to create a far greater variety of type of image. You can see those bottom three images, getting into the telephoto stuff and finding a totally different style. And again, that variety that I was really lacking the first 18 months or so. And then I mentioned the opportunity to learn astrophotography. Turns out it wasn't nearly as difficult as I always assumed it was. I figured you had all this special gear and all this stuff. And it's really just like any other type of photography, just you got to know some rules around it. But that taught me some things I was able to leverage in the future. So I don't do a ton of astro today, but I've had other opportunities come up unexpectedly where things I learned through astrophotography, such as using an intervalometer to set up the repeat shots to take over and over for star trails or time lapse of the Milky Way or whatever, that's something I was able to leverage when I was in at the Grand Canyon in 2018, and suddenly there's a wildfire and lightning coming in, and I knew immediately that from shooting astro, I could set up my camera with the intervalometer and just set it to take repeated images to try to catch that lightning striking into the wildfire. So again, it's looking through these things as, at one point I thought, oh, I'm just going to be a night sky photographer. That's all I'm going to do. Well, that's not how it played out, but that's still experience and knowledge that I've got that I can pull from and leverage in my day-to-day shooting experiences as they were. Let me get into 2018, and this is really, it's just quite frankly the year of excess. So coming out of 2017, there were, again, a couple things I started to recognize is one, and I think I mentioned this in my last session, talking about that visualization and realization piece, but I would get to a scene or a location, I'd find something that looked interesting, and I'd put down the tripod, and then my tripod grew roots, and I never moved from that spot. And I probably missed out on a whole bunch of opportunities to maybe find better compositions or just more compositions to capture. So again, by this point, I really knew where I'd kind of gone through I'm going to be a travel photographer, I'm going to be an astrophotographer, these different genres, kind of feeling my way through it. By this point, I knew that landscapes are really what drew me in. But there are a couple of things beyond just the tripod growing roots is I didn't have a whole lot of outdoor experience. So suddenly I'm in this hobby, passion, whatever, but I didn't have a background of going out and camping or backpacking or hiking or anything like that. So I wanted to get some experiences under my belt in that regard. So that was one of my goals going into 2018. I still felt that even though I shot a lot more in 2017, I needed to continue to try to shoot more as I went into 2018 to have that continual practice and opportunity to improve. And then from a post-processing standpoint, I was fairly happy with the results I was getting, but A, I was spending a lot of time on it, and B, it wasn't necessarily consistent. And I didn't really have the foundational knowledge of how to achieve the image I had visualized. I didn't really know how to realize that through consistent processing. So it was a lot of trial and error. So I wanted to dig into that for 2018. So really it was travel and get that outdoor experience. I did some workshops to help with that. The mobility of not just being planted to the tripod and then focusing on my processing through 2018. So this was really a huge year of learning. To me, 2018 is where my progression really, if you're looking at a bell curve, not a progression curve, whatever, that's where I really shot up and kind of found my style, found my creative voice, and found a lot more consistency from location to location, shot to shot, so on and so forth. So this year, between business trips for work and signing up for workshops, I was all over the place. I started out in Arizona. I had a trip to Colorado for a workshop. I had a workshop in Wyoming. Another business trip, I took advantage for a whirlwind tour of the Grand Canyon and Bryce Canyon. So any time I had an opportunity to go somewhere different and shoot something differently, I leapt on it. Arizona was the first time I ever slept in a tent and did what I would consider, real hikes as opposed to just walking around a local park. Going into the Wyoming, the Grand Teton workshop, I had this grand vision of wildlife just prancing all over the place, and I'm going to get all these great photos of animals. And I went out and bought the Tamron 150 to 600, but I had not really done wildlife photography, so I signed up for a summer workshop at Fossil Rim, which for those of you in Texas here, you might be familiar with the wildlife sanctuary and preserve, and there's a photographer that does workshops there. So I did a 2-day workshop there and learned a lot about shooting handheld with a big lens like that and composing for wildlife and thinking about the lighting with wildlife and that. The ironic part of it is it turns out animals absolutely hate me, and I saw one moose on the backside of a bear for the entire week I was in Wyoming. But regardless, I learned a lot. And then just from a post-processing standpoint, thinking through the cycle again, the learn piece of it is just consuming hours upon hours of videos and reading articles and seeking input and feedback on my processing so I could really get that deep dive on it. And again, go from the trial and error process to being able to sit down and say, okay, well, here's what I envisioned when I took this shot. I know I can do A, B, C, D, and E and achieve the result in Lightroom or Photoshop that I had in mind when I was out in the field with the camera. And what came out of this essentially is, I shot a heck of a lot more, but I also lifted the bar in terms of the results I was getting, where I call them potentials. So I go through, I rate my system, my images with stars, and a 3-star image is one that I consider it has some type of potential. Maybe I'll start editing and it doesn't pan out, but it's a potential. So I went from fewer than 100 in 2017 to almost 300 potentials in 2018, or some variations of them. And even whittling those down further, I still ended with 150 that I ended up working on within Lightroom. So again, I'm seeing rapid progression now just from the act of practice, because I did so much shooting. Now, the downside to this is, well, there's an upside and a downside, is I've got several images from 2018 that are still in my portfolio today that I offer for purchase as a print, whatever. So, I still feel that the progression I felt then, I recognize that the progression was what I thought then, it was legitimate and I'm happy with the work I produced. The downside to it is I took over 10,000 shots in 2018. And that is a heck of a lot of work to go through those. And frankly, I've got noted here, I've got 12 images in my current portfolio from 2018. I'm still pulling stuff out of there, which is great. I've got it, especially with 2020, I've got this huge archive of photos to pull from. but it ain't a lot of fun shooting 10,000 shots. And I'm not a wedding photographer. This is all wildlife and nature stuff. It's a lot of work to weed through those and find the ones you really want to work on. But again, I learned just an absolute ton because I shot so much. The other thing here is, I think out of the 40 shots that I've got represented on the screen here that I can kind of consider my best ones that I've edited so far from 2018, only 9 of those used a tripod. And of those, really, I had to use a tripod. It was astrophotography or very low light. Now, I did quote unquote ruin some shots because I was shooting handheld, in some cases not the greatest light, so I was shooting at higher ISOs. Maybe I was missing focus a little bit, but it's about the learning experience of what I got out of that. And again, I was much more productive and successful through the act of just shooting than I would have been if I'd still been stuck in that rut of see thing, set down tripod, shoot thing, don't move, just keep shooting the same thing, or maybe move 2 or 3 feet and basically shoot the same thing. So it's all about that learning process to help you proceed or progress. Another quick water break here. If you guys are lucky, you'll get my Barry White voice by the end of this. So let's talk about 2019. So 2018 was great. I had a lot of fun. I shot a lot. I went to more national parks and all these great locations than I'd ever been in my life, let alone in such a short period of time. But if I'm being honest and reflecting upon things, and even kind of in the moment and as the year progressed, I realized I was getting a little cocky in some regards. My stuff doesn't stink. I'm this great photographer. When in reality, again, I was well on my journey still learning, and I am today. But it was to a point where I was recognizing and not particularly liking that aspect of myself. And also I was seeing some negativity creeping in. And again, kind of around the expectations I was going into a location with, oh, well, if I'm at the Grand Canyon, I must have this amazing sunset or whatever. And again, I talked about this in my last session, but it's setting yourself up for that frustration, disappointment, depression. For me, it was shutting me down where I'd get somewhere and I didn't have the conditions I had envisioned, and I wouldn't necessarily know what to do, or I would just be so bummed out about it that I just didn't have a desire to shoot. So 2 things right there that I really wanted to try to address in some goals I set myself with photography in 2019. But also another biggie was, because I shot so much in 2018 with those 10,000 shots and just see something, shoot, see something, shoot, see something, shoot, I had some great experiences, but all I really have from it is the photos of those experiences. I don't really have much of a recollection of the experiences from a inner mental, emotional standpoint. Like thinking back on it now today, the one that I clearly remember was that wildfire with lightning striking into it, the way I was shaking after I saw that I got the shot that I wanted. But so much of that year is just a blur, and looking back at the photos and going, yeah, I remember being there, but I don't remember the emotions I felt. I don't remember, the experience of truly being there and present. So that was something I really wanted to think about in 2019 as I went through the year. So I wanted to slow back down, focus on mindfulness, which I recognized was one of my favorite things about photography. Was when I'm behind the camera or looking for a composition in nature, the rest of the world just kind of fades into the background. And, I'm not worrying about work or what I've got to do at home or in the yard or money, whatever. It all just fades away. So how do I emphasize that and make sure I'm allowing that to be part of my process as I continue on my journey of photography? And then just continuing, of course, no big surprise, once you get that travel bug and have the opportunity to do some travel, of course, you want to just continue to explore more and visit new places and experience new things. So 2019 started out really, really great. Right off the bat, I went to Caddo Lake in February. Had terrible conditions, but still it was a cool experience and something I'd never really seen before. And then in April, some weird guy named John Fisher randomly messaged me and invited me on a trip to Arkansas. I've said this before probably, but I'm still not convinced John messaged the right Mike, but I took it. great experience. That's how I met Linda. So that was a great start to the year. I had some new opportunities to do some teaching, which I kind of had that taste of in 2017, but just didn't have the opportunity to do in 2018. I did some Lightroom tutoring. I started a blog, which I've done horrible about keeping up with, but finding ways to share the knowledge I had gained from kind of that beginner viewpoint, but also I saw it as a way of kind of paying it forward in terms of most of what I learned, other than attending workshops, was from people sharing their own experiences and knowledge online. And I wanted to be a part of that and also try to hopefully add a little bit of a unique voice to it. So again, I started out in Caddo Lake, had the great trip in Arkansas with waterfalls and stuff I'd never had an opportunity to shoot before there as well. Another friend of mine invited me on a trip to Alabama Hills and Death Valley out in California. Awesome. The big highlight of the year is I unexpectedly had another work trip back to Ireland. So I'm not stupid. I took advantage of that and extended the trip through that weekend after, and scrambled around Ireland to take advantage and shoot that. And then I kind of decided going into the year that I didn't want to do any more workshops. I kind of felt like I had the knowledge at that point that I would get out of a workshop. But I still was this kind of newbie in terms of that outdoor experience and going to someplace like Glacier National Park and finding the locations to shoot and probably frankly just kind of the confidence in myself to do that. So I had signed up for a workshop in Glacier National Park kind of last minute. So I had some great experiences again. And the biggest thing I took away from it in 2019 was the fact that I wanted to go into it and being more present and mindful of the experience that I had emotionally and mentally, and not just picture and get so wrapped up in that. So I went from shooting over 10,000 shots to only shooting about 3,000 shots, but I was more productive. I came out with more my quote unquote potentials and came out with more images that in the end are what I consider today portfolio shots. So even though I took far less, my hit rate, my quality score, whatever you want to call it, went up dramatically through that experience of what I did in 2018, just to learn through the brute force practicing I did, but also then applying okay, let's slow back down and really focus on getting the shot, not just 100 shots and one of those ends up being the shot. So really, really pleased with the progression I saw throughout the year, and actually came out with about 75 shots that they may not all be in my portfolio, but for the most part, I feel like they're all really, really strong images that I'm very happy with. And I didn't have to weed through 10,000 freaking photos to find them. Again, nice progression. Had the opportunity to start teaching. I felt a huge improvement in my consistency as well as the quality. So I could go out with those fewer shots and more consistently produce a portfolio worthy image. But I think probably the biggest thing I got out of it was going in with trying to manage those expectations. I was able to pull in my experiences from 2017, 2018 to better adapt to different conditions, opportunities, locations. Showing up in Glacier to a totally fogged in view of a mountain, it still kind of stinks, but I didn't totally shut down. You're still looking for ways to be creative given the conditions that are given to you. You have no control over it. So stay calm. Don't let the buildup of expectations beforehand take away from still what you can enjoy about being in the moment and being present at the location. It's still an incredible experience. And then 2020, this is when I pulled this image, it actually was intended to kind of show how in 2020, I wanted to continue to just roll with the punches and let things come to me and not have all these built up expectations beforehand. But just 2020, what can you say? We'll just leave it at that. So going in 2020, I wanted to continue to focus on slowing down. I really loved the mindful present approach I took in 2019, and I wanted to build upon that. I was happy with the progression. I just kind of wanted to do more of it. And when I say take more of a film approach, kind of tell myself, hey, it's going to cost you $20 for every photo you take this year. It's not to say that I didn't have times when you're still taking a lot of shots because you're trying to capture a fleeting moment or whatever, but intentionally I wanted to really, really slow down and try to take as few images as possible, but again, up my quality of those images I was taking. And I really enjoyed the opportunities to start teaching a little bit and to pay that forward. So I wanted to focus on that in 2020 as well. So going into the kickoff of 2020, I was actually coming out of a period of about 5 months where I didn't pick up my camera at all. As great as 2019 started off, when I was in Glacier, my aunt actually passed away. So when I got back from that trip, I basically got off one plane and got on another to go to the funeral for that. And then a week and a half after that, at my real job, my big boy job, we did a massive restructuring and my job was eliminated. They put me in a different position, thankfully, so I didn't lose my income. But suddenly I was in this entirely new world and in an area I didn't have background in. Life happens. We've all experienced it. And so I had signed up for Out of Yosemite conference in Yosemite in February of 2020. And I'm going into this, iconic location, having not even taken a single photo since August. So going into that, I was focusing on the mindfulness piece of it, wanting to appreciate being present and everything I enjoyed about the experience of being in nature. But I also was trying to do some pre-visualizing for the first time, not from an expectation standpoint of, well, if I get this amazing sunset and fog and mist or snow in Yosemite Valley, all those iconic shots you see. Well, what if I get blue skies? Because that's what the forecast is looking. So if I come across this, I'll shoot that. If I come across that, I'm going to shoot this. And just kind of thinking through, getting myself, since I didn't have the opportunity to go shooting before the trip, kind of like the Blue Angels, right? Like you're visualizing, okay, if I go here, I'm going to get this and so on and so forth. So really kind of bringing the mental aspect of it to the forefront of just of my approach to photography in general. Coming out of the Yosemite conference, I kind of set a soft goal around trying to improve my black and white processing. I hadn't done a lot of it. I wasn't really confident in it. So I came out of that, wanted to focus on that as a goal in the year. And then when everything just totally got flipped upside down with the pandemic, my only option was I needed to shoot local. And I think the biggest thing I got out of 2020 from a photography standpoint, Yosemite was great. But as I've been into landscape photography, I've always bemoaned the fact, where are you from when you meet another photographer? Oh, I live in North Texas. The worst place to live if you're a landscape photographer. Well, 2020 forced me that if I wanted to shoot, I had to shoot local. So fortunately, I've got a local park here that I've been going to for almost a decade now. But I've never really learned it, never really used it for quote unquote professional photography, just my opportunity to get into nature. Well, now here's my opportunity to learn that spot and make the most of it as I could, and just do the best as I could with the circumstances we were all handed in 2020. So from an overview standpoint, I took less shots in 2020 than I'd taken any year since 2016, when I only shot the 390 shots or whatever. But that wasn't so much because of the pandemic, but really, I think regardless of the pandemic, I probably wouldn't have shot a whole lot more, because it was intentional that I go in and I focus again on being present, being in the moment, the mindfulness piece of it, and slowing down and finding the composition, finding the scene I wanted to shoot, as opposed to just rolling up somewhere and start pulling the trigger. I was using the tripod, but through 2019 and 2020, remembering the experience of 2017 and the challenge that I set for myself in 2018 to not use the tripod, knowing that, yes, I want to use the tripod from, being able to nail my focus and a stable, base for the camera and all that, but I still needed to maintain mobile, or the mobility piece of it. So set up the tripod and take the shot I see, but still make sure I'm exploring the area and finding, again, the composition that I really want, not just one composition out of 100 that I'm just going to fire off back to back to back to back. So kind of pulling this all together now is, as I went into the year, I had Yosemite, I had a trip planned for Utah in March that got canceled as everything started shutting down. So here I am another 3-4 months down the line, having not picked up the camera. Then I had an opportunity for a camping trip in Colorado, which was okay. It was challenging because I was rusty, but came out of that fairly happy. It was a second trip to Colorado in October where I really had to draw on what I learned through the experience of 2018 and just shooting and getting off the tripod and just kind of letting things flow. I really got to a point on that second trip where I was not inspired. I wasn't feeling creative. I had only taken a handful of shots. I didn't like any of them. And then suddenly an opportunity presented itself that we had an afternoon snowstorm. And this was a trip not centered on photography. It was just a trip with Heather and me, but we were being lazy in the apartment and all of a sudden look out and it's snowing pretty heavily. So grabbed my camera, left the tripod intentionally behind, threw the camera in aperture priority mode and auto ISO, and I just went out and shot. And suddenly, by using that experience of 2018 and knowing that kind of got me out of a funk in 2017, or coming out of 2017, just going out and shooting and letting things flow naturally. Suddenly I was feeling inspired. The creativity was sparked again. And I got some shots I was really, really happy with on a trip that otherwise really, I didn't come away with anything that I would consider of my normal quality, so to speak. So again, those past experiences let me adapt and pivot on the fly, both when we went into shutdown and I couldn't travel. What can I draw on from those past experiences, different focal lengths, different types of photography, maybe focusing more on woodland photography than I've done in the past. And then getting into that second trip in Colorado and just feeling totally stuck and stagnant and uninspired, and pulling from that past experience of, okay, I felt like this before. What did I do? How did I overcome this? I've got that experience to draw on because of a past goal I set for myself. So really happy with 2020. And without a doubt, I feel it's my best work. As great as the photography side of things go, still pretty bummed I had to cancel that trip to Utah, but made the best of a tough situation that we all went through there. So here's the nerd chart real quickly. You don't need to worry about any of this other than really just look at the right hand. This is just something I was doing as I was going through and prepping for this and pulling stats out of Lightroom. But the main takeaway here is on the left, you see the line dropping down as I took fewer and fewer photos. On the right, the line going up. Those are my portfolio shots. So I had the experience of 2018 where practice, and I really felt like I hit my stride and honed my skills. Certainly not mastered, but pretty happy with the outcomes. Then focusing on quality versus quantity, taking fewer shots, but my keep rate had increased exponentially. And that's all driven by how I set goals for myself and how I've challenged myself over the last few years, especially to drive that improvement and keep from having to take 10,000 shots to come out with 50 at the end of the year that I'm happy with. Then 2021, nothing earth-shattering to share here. I do want to start printing. I think I'm going to learn some more about post-processing. Through that process, you hear it as a kind of a cliche, and I kind of feel it that taking the photo or making the photo is not really done if you don't have the print experience. And I've had stuff printed for me, but I don't do the prints myself. So still trying to weigh the pros and cons of plunking the money down in a printer, but that's certainly something I want to start doing this year. Continue to enjoy the experience, the mindfulness of everything. Make the most of the local familiarity that I built last year. I'm extremely familiar with my local part. And actually, John and I just went out there back in February, start of February, something like that, on a foggy morning. And I knew, because I'd been to that location so much, where to go and take advantage of the conditions and so on and so forth. I want to continue to leverage that. It's one of those things, the more familiar you become with a local spot, the more you discover and you can take advantage of it. And then just seeking more opportunities to teach others. And the thing here is, whether you want to do what I'm kind of doing and try to make this a side hustle or a career or whatever, teaching others, and again, it's kind of a corporate cliche, but teaching somebody else is one of the best ways to learn as well, because it makes you step back and really evaluate and think through what you've done yourself and how to break that down into simple terms for somebody that's not at the same point you are, but you're trying to bring them to the same point that you're at and help them learn and grow on their own. So if you've got the opportunity to help somebody else, formally, informally, whatever, it's a great way to make you take that step back and ask the questions of your own work, do that evaluation step, and break it down to the pieces that help you grow. And it also gives the opportunity to help somebody else. So time to do the self-analysis, evaluation, whatever. So I would recommend, kind of what I do is, first of all, I'm a very analytical person at work and life in general. Heather will be the first to tell you that, like, looking at printers, I've spent 6 months now researching printers and reading reviews and watching videos. So it's kind of in my nature, but for me, it's asking, where do you want to go? So asking yourself, where do I want to go? And where am I now today on that journey? Do you want to be an advanced hobbyist? Do you want to get the most out of photography just for yourself and nobody else? Do you just want to share stuff on social media, but make the most beautiful work you can? Do you want to try and make money out of it, enter competitions? Where do you want to be? And then start asking kind of questions below those of, where am I at in terms of achieving those goals? So how do I feel about my work and what's holding me back? Am I being held back by some weakness on my technical skills with the camera or post-processing knowledge or skills? Do I have difficulty assessing my own work, or am I caught in that echo chamber where everybody's telling me everything's so great that I can't get out of that echo chamber and really critically assess my own work and identify where I do have opportunities to grow? Are you suffering from stagnation or boredom, as probably many of us experienced in 2020? Do you feel your composition is just not quite as good as it should be? Or is it more mind and body related? Are you feeling stressed or confused or overwhelmed? Are you feeling envy about what other photographers are doing, or whatever the case may be? So going into those, asking yourself, okay, I've identified these opportunities. Now what resources are out there that I can leverage? So if you're struggling with technical skills, there's tons of YouTube stuff, there's workshops, there's articles and blogs. It's certainly an area that I've gotten a lot out of, some one-on-one tutoring and attending the workshops myself. Same thing with post-processing knowledge and skills, whether it be Lightroom or Photoshop. Tons of online resources for free, but I've paid for plenty of courses. That's actually something I did last year with the downtime. Was I went out and purchased 3 different photographers' courses on Photoshop to teach myself Photoshop, since I'm a Lightroom guy. Still a Lightroom guy, but I learned a lot. If you're stuck in that echo chamber and you're having trouble taking that high level step back and looking at your work as a whole, seek impartial feedback. One of the things I did, I think it was 2019, there's a website, Nature Photographers Network. I think it's like $60 a year, but it's a blend of serious, semi-professionals, professionals, extreme hobbyists, whatever you call it, some very talented people, but also people just starting out. And they've got critique galleries in there. You can share your own work for critique if you want, or you can just share your work, but you can also go in and critique other people's work. So it gives you the opportunity to get that impartial feedback. And the thing I love about that site, and I'm not sponsored by them, I'm not shilling for them, other than I do really enjoy the site, is everybody's they're direct and honest, but in a very appropriate way. They're not trying to tear you down or make you feel like crap or anything like that. So there's that. There's Facebook groups. You could pay a tutor or somebody to do a critique session with you, find a mentorship. The thing with the echo chamber piece, again, I've said it a couple of times, is friends are all well and good, but they're not always honest. And I've asked like family members for, hey, what do you guys think about? Oh, it's phenomenal. It's the greatest thing you've ever done. Maybe don't ask mom. Mom loves you and doesn't want to hurt your feelings. So go out and try to find either, like I can send stuff to John or Linda and get feedback, and I know I'm going to get an honest opinion on it. They're not worried about hurting my feelings. They're giving me constructive feedback that I'm seeking to help me get over something that I'm not quite sure about, or I just want that impartial input on. The other great thing about going out, even if you're only doing it for yourself and not sharing it with the person, critiquing other people's work and looking at it in terms of, what do you like about it? What don't you like about it? Why do you like their work better than your work? And again, breaking it down into those building blocks to help you identify, well, I feel their composition's better. What about it is better that I can apply to my own work? Things like that. Stagnation and boredom. Maybe you've never shot wildlife. I never had shot bird photos until 2018. So, get a big lens and try that. You learn a lot. It's not something I do intentionally, maybe if the opportunity presents itself, but I learned a ton, and it got me through some months where I didn't have trips in that. And just that learning experience helped me get out of that kind of bored mindset. Try macro, try doing what I'm not going to shoot sunsets the rest of the year or the next 3 months or whatever. Give yourself a 1 lens challenge. I'm only going to shoot with my 24-70 for the next 30 days. I'm only going to shoot with my 100-400 for the next 30 days. find things to do that are out of your comfort zone or out of the norm of how you shoot to get some new interesting things and learn some new things and skills to get you over that hump of feeling like you've stagnated or just are bored in general. And then from a mind and body standpoint, I've talked a lot about how for me, photography is my mindfulness. But I was having some frustrations creep in, some negativity creep in. So looking for ways to, what is a trigger and how do I either respond to it more positively or avoid it altogether? And then for me too is, I'm not in the greatest of shape. So this year I'm trying to get myself in shape. So when I'm out shooting, I've got the energy and the stamina to do what I want. The probably the biggest thing here, and I apologize, it's not showing my next slide here, but what has worked for me over my journey may not work for you, but it's again, asking those questions and evaluating where you're at, where you feel you've got the opportunity, and then what you can leverage so you can go out and just practice, practice, practice. There's nothing to ask yourself here. Just get out there and shoot. And maybe you need to set some time frame. I'm going to do it for 30 days, 60 days, whatever. Maybe check in at 30 days of a 60-day challenge and evaluate where you're at. Do you need an accountability buddy? Hey, John, I'm going to go shoot my 100 to 400 for the next 30 days. And I want your input. Probably not going to do that because he'll just make me feel bad. But again, it's a very solo activity in many cases, landscape photography, nature photography, but it can be helpful to have that accountability with somebody else. And then you start all over. You evaluate your progress. How far have I come? Where am I at today versus 30 days ago, 60 days ago? Ask others for feedback on my work today versus what I shared with you previously. And again, just constantly having that process of evaluate, learn, go out and practice, and then you start over, evaluate what you've just learned and practiced. Maybe you make some new goals. Maybe you determine you're on the right path. You need to tweak some things, and you just keep repeating that over and over and over again. And I don't think you'll find many photographers out there, whether they've been shooting for a year or 5 years or 15 or 20 years, that would say that it's not constantly a learning experience with photography. That's one of the things I like most about it. So take advantage of that. There's always something new out there you can learn to help you grow and progress on your journey. And with that, as my voice is faltering more and more, thank you very much for listening to my journey. And again, I hope this sparks some questions for you to ask yourself to help you grow on your own journeys as well.
Michael, it was a wonderful presentation, but I have to ask, what's this picture about right here?
Yeah, I have to keep it in these just for you, Linda. First, this is the classic shot from Arkansas. If you look closely on Zoom, you might be able to see some scrape marks on the rock. That's where I gracefully landed on my rear end coming down that rock. And then like 2 minutes later, turn around and see John do the exact same thing. So fortunately, you did not capture on camera. You just have the memory of it. So I have to include this for you every time with my waterproof socks. Rocking a great style there.
Yeah, that was one of the fun moments on that trip. I was very happy that neither one of you hurt yourself, and I still have regrets for not running video on that. Okay, so grab a drink. There's a couple of questions in here, and I want to scroll through here. Gary Sims wanted to know, which courses on Photoshop did you like the best, and would you recommend?
So I know I keep picking on John, but he'll disagree with me. I did, I think, 3 courses on Photoshop. One was Nick Page's. I want to say I got one from Eric Bennett, and then Alex Noriega. All great, but Photoshop's just not for me. So
okay, so I'm sorry, I heard Nick Page. Who was the second one?
Eric Bennett, Bennett.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, he's great. And that third one was Alex Noriega, who is absolutely wonderful.
Phenomenal. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he's really fantastic. Ben wanted to know, you'd mentioned you went to, I thought you said it was a Facebook forum for image critiques. Do you remember what?
So it wasn't a Facebook forum, Nature Photography Network, NPN. I don't have the URL handy. John, if you know it, feel free to drop it in the chat.
Yeah,
That's the one. It's $60 a year, and it's not just critiques. It's again, you can just share photos. They've got great articles. Alex Noriega is active on there, and they've got different professionals that write monthly articles and blogs, and just some great content on there in general. So it's far more than just the critiques. I'm sure there are some Facebook groups out there that offer that. I haven't participated in any of them or found any.
Okay, that sounds great. And John has dropped in F64 Academy is great on YouTube. Yeah. So if you're into nerdy Photoshop stuff, you might want to look into that. Okay, so there's a couple of comments that I want to make, and mostly they're selfish ones. And let's start with 2019. When you showed your portfolio, Michael, I was looking, and they're teeny tiny little, little, what do you call them? Little images.
Thumbnails.
But I was super excited to see so many of them from our Arkansas trip, and that was a great trip, and it was a great opportunity for me to meet new people, and you were one of those people. And as we flowed into 2020 and how awful 2020 was for us to be kind of trapped at home, today actually is exactly a year from me being quote unquote sheltering at home. So, but in 2020, when we started the Happiness Hour, just to have you come on and do these presentations for us have just been a thrill. And I really appreciate you not saying no when I invite you to come do this. So
I appreciate the opportunities.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed that. And that's a selfish thing, but I truly appreciate the feedback and the camaraderie and, just kind of watching us all figure out what we're doing with our art. When you had said, just getting bored, and when you mentioned, that little snowstorm, and I have to say that the little trigger went off for me. I've been limited to backyard birding and maybe some flowers, which I love both of those. But that snow day was just it was like a shot of adrenaline and excitement. And I think that it kind of gave a little push of, oh my gosh, we get to do something different and,
right.
and see different, it was kind of like a different scenery. We don't get snow in Texas like that. So it was fantastic. The only comment that I want to make is that little chimpanzee that was holding that camera. I noticed the little dig. Michael is a Canon shooter. So for him to use a Nikon, just
okay. So I did not make the image. That's not my me.
No.
But I almost did make a comment about the fact that you should recognize that it is a Nikon shooter.
And I'm the Nikon shooter in the group. So thanks for that. So,
I was trying to be nice, not mention it, but you brought it up.
I was like, I hope someone else caught that. Okay, I don't see, let me just glance real quick. I was kind of chatting, so let me make sure I don't miss any questions. And I think we caught all of them. So is there anything you want to you've given us a lot of information, a lot of insight.
One was, I know this one was a little bit different. Hopefully, like I said, the whole goal here was not just to blather about, it was about my journey, but to hopefully spark some ideas in your own minds for your own journeys and help you find some creative ways to continue progressing and get to where you want to be. So again, just appreciate you having me on here. If anybody wants to share what you've taken away from this, and maybe you come up with a goal or a challenge for yourself, feel free to shoot me an email or contact me on Instagram or whatever. I'd love to hear it and know that this was helpful to you. But at the end of the day, we're all in this together. And I agree. Like for me, I've always been very much an introvert, and I still am, but I have found a community in photography where I love being around people, and that really sucked about 2020. So yeah, I'd love to hear from anybody that has a takeaway from this that helps them grow.
Thank you, Michael. You guys can connect with Michael through his website at michaelrungphotography.com. And if you're on Instagram, look for him at Michael Rung Photography. If you haven't checked out the Happiness Hour community blog, I'd like to invite you to take a peek, because Jama Pantel, Valerie Hoffman, Trish Ziegler, and Gail Feddick have contributed articles to help us build the community blog. If you'd like to contribute an article, just take a look at the invitation on my website, mindfulness.com for details. Tomorrow night, we have a bonus session of the Happiness Hour. Macro photographer Mika Geiger and special guest Master Gardener Barbara Vance will present Photographing Our Hidden World. Until next time, go out and create something beautiful, and I hope that we see you again soon.